I have always believed in my strength and independence. From a young age, I learned to rely on my own abilities, striving for success in my work and supporting the people close to me. Every morning began with determination and a clear plan to achieve my goals, no matter what. This is how I lived my years, convinced that the world belongs to those who know how to keep control of the situation. But everything changed the moment Jack appeared in my life. His contagious smile and confidence in every step opened up a new side of life, making my heart beat faster. We quickly found common ground, and with each passing day, I felt something awakening inside me that had once seemed unattainable. I thought that with him, I could find the harmony that had been so missing in my daily struggle for success. The feeling that my life was taking on a new meaning became even brighter when I learned that I would soon become a mother. The news of my pregnancy filled me with joy and awe, as if a road to an unknown but magical world of motherhood had opened before me. I imagined how our home would change, how Jack and I would grow together and learn to love like never before. In June, when our little Thomas was born, I felt that everything was finally falling into place. In his tiny face, I saw the reflection of hope and a future worth fighting for. It was in those moments that I realized that life can bring miracles, even when we least expect them, and that every new chapter is filled with opportunities for joy and personal growth. Life outside the familiar office opened up a completely new world to me, where every day was filled with unexpected challenges and changes. Working from home initially seemed like an enticing opportunity to spend more time with my family, but soon I realized that the true difficulty lay in managing the endless flow of household chores and taking care of the children. My mornings became a battle against relentless time. Waking up early turned into a series of rituals, preparing breakfast, getting the kids ready, and trying to bring order to a house where every task demanded my attention. The seconds dragged on, and it felt as if I was trying to maintain a balance between the roles of a mother, a housekeeper, and a woman who had always strived for independence and success. Jack, immersed in his work, would come home under the cover of night. A few times I had to wake him when he couldn't wake up on his own. Each of those mornings was accompanied by a sharp tone and indignation, despite the importance of what I was doing. His words, filled with exhaustion, tore me apart as I tried to explain the need for him to wake up for our little Thomas and the future in which we both played important roles. Gradually, I began to realize the home was not just a place where you live, but a stage for an endless performance where every little thing matters. And despite the fatigue, I started to find my small victories in this. Each quiet morning when the children peacefully fell asleep, or each silent moment when the house was filled with comfort, reminded me that even in the most mundane routine, there is a special beauty hidden. Over time, Jack's strange behavior began to accumulate, like quiet but persistent signals pointing to something wrong. His late returns and unconvincing excuses gradually became a source of internal unease. In the evenings, when he came home looking exhausted, his words sounded different than before. It seemed that behind each of them, there was some kind of secret. One day, by chance, I found myself in the same room when I noticed his phone lighting up with continuous messages. Curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't resist the temptation to glance at the screen. What I saw shook me to my core. The words, addressed not to me but to someone else, were filled with hidden meaning and careless hints that could not be interpreted as mere communication. These messages became the very glimpse of truth that I had been trying to ignore for so long. Several weeks before Thomas was born, I found undeniable proof of his infidelity. Amid the business conversations and random notes, there were fragments of messages showing that Jack had gotten involved in a relationship that went beyond simple communication with colleagues. These lines, like cold blades, pierced my heart, leaving only pain and a sense of betrayal. At that moment, the world I had so carefully built around myself suddenly began to crumble. I tried to find a logical explanation for his behavior, but the more I searched, the clearer it became that what lay before me was harsh reality. The inner voice, which had once been quiet and confident, now screamed of injustice and pain, demanding that I pay attention to my own feelings. This raw truth became the starting point for a new chapter in my life, one in which I would have to decide how to live on, despite the deep wounds left by betrayal. After Thomas was born, it seemed that our life was beginning to gain stability. Each morning brought hope for new opportunities, and quiet family evenings gave a sense of comfort. But one day, when the house was wrapped in its usual calm, I felt that something had changed. It wasn't a loud warning, but a quiet yet persistent call inside me that wouldn't let me rest. One day, while preparing dinner, I suddenly stopped in the middle of cooking. My gaze involuntarily drifted across the familiar kitchen walls, but instead of the usual reassurance, I felt a slight chill inside. It seemed as though every movement, every sound from the echo of raindrops outside the window to the creaking of the old chair had taken on a new, unsettling tone. In that moment, I realized that something was wrong. This quiet anxiety, like a faint rustle behind me, made me ask the question, where is the truth hiding? The next day, while strolling slowly in the park, I tried to calm the internal unease. The rustling of leaves underfoot, the soft light of the morning sun, and the cool breeze, all of it seemed ordinary. But in my mind, an unclear sense of caution was growing. Every detail seemed to hint that the familiar picture of life was slowly being covered by the shadows of uncertainty. I couldn't understand where this feeling was coming from, but my intuition told me it wasn't random. Returning home, I tried to find logical explanations. Fatigue, stress, maybe minor misunderstandings? But the voice inside me wouldn't quiet down. It reminded me of those moments when small, seemingly insignificant things added up into a picture I had been trying to overlook. An indescribable anxiety, like a soft whisper, awakened questions in me that I hadn't been looking for answers to before. This subconscious alertness made my heart beat a little faster and awakened an understanding that in the usual routine, unexpected changes were hiding. During those days, I learned to listen to myself, to pay attention to those faint signs that suggested it was time to be more vigilant. I understood. Intuition isn't just an emotion, but an important signal from life itself, warning of what's to come. And even though there was no clear evidence of change yet, I knew that I couldn't avoid it. This feeling became the beginning of a new stage for me, a stage when I needed to learn to trust myself, so as not to lose what truly mattered to me. One morning, as the city was just waking up, I decided to go for a run to clear my mind and release my thoughts. The fresh air, rhythmic steps, and the rustling of leaves created a sense of calm that usually helped me forget about the household chores. But today, something was different. During my run, I noticed that Jack's car was parked at the far end of our complex, a place where he had never left it before. This unexpected detail made my heart beat faster. We had always adhered to the agreement, sharing our locations to strengthen mutual trust. But now, on my phone's screen, there was no familiar signal of his presence. His device was turned off. This seemingly insignificant detail in an ordinary day suddenly turned into a sign that he was hiding something. With each passing moment, doubt and worry grew, and I began to realize more clearly. The usual calm was deceptive, and behind every detail, there was its own truth. Deciding not to ignore it, I began to look for any clues that might shed light on his actions. In the silence of the early morning, I felt my intuition urging me to take action. I gradually quickened my pace while also thinking about the best way to understand what was going on. My thoughts spun around questions. Where could Jack have gone? Why had he deliberately turned off his location? What secrets was he hiding behind this unusual change? With every new thought, the sense of anxiety grew stronger, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. And so, taking a deep breath, I made my decision. To find out where his car was headed, even if the truth turned out to be different from what I had imagined. This resolve, born in the silence of the morning park, became the first step on the path to the answers I so desperately wanted to find. The next morning, when the first rays of the sun barely touched the windows, Jack came home earlier than usual. His haste and restraint immediately gave away that the day had not begun as it always had. He quietly passed by me, heading for the bathroom, leaving a neatly wrapped gift on the table. This gesture, usually filled with warmth, now seemed like just an attempt to atone for an invisible guilt that hung over our home. Feeling the anxiety growing inside me, I couldn't hold back and headed toward his personal things. The doubts had become unbearable, and I took his phone. When Jack disappeared behind the bathroom door, I quietly unlocked the screen, and the world around me seemed to freeze. Among the usual messages, I found a conversation with a woman from our complex. Each word, every phrase seemed to nail my mind with the force of a hammer. He was writing about how he would soon come to give her his energy, as if promising her something he had never given to me. Instantly, like a lightning strike, my confidence shattered. I couldn't believe that the person to whom I had entrusted all my secrets and dreams was capable of such a painful betrayal. In those moments, time stood still. My heart was beating so forcefully, it felt as if it wanted to burst out of my chest, and my thoughts tangled in an endless whirlpool of doubt and pain. Each line I found destroyed the world I had so carefully built around us. Memories of happy moments, of our shared plans, suddenly seemed like an illusion, without any foundation. I felt the coldness of despair and anger spreading inside me, and tears quietly began to flow down my cheeks, reminding me how fragile trust can be. That moment became a turning point. The betrayal, revealed through the cold light of the screen, changed me forever. I stood there, engulfed in pain, realizing that now our life was divided into before and after. This revelation stripped me of all comfort, forcing me to reconsider everything that had once seemed eternal. The unbearable pain and the feeling of betrayal tore me apart from the inside, and I could no longer sit idly by, watching Jack continue to destroy our trust. In the quiet of that early morning when he had already left the house, I felt a resolve awakening within me to give him an answer. While it might not resolve all the problems, it would allow me to feel at least a small sense of control over my life. I walked into the kitchen, where every item held memories of our shared days, and with bitterness in my heart, I began preparing breakfast, which was meant to be a symbolic reflection of my pain. First, I took his favorite bread and generously sprinkled it with salt, so that every bite would remind him of how bitter his actions could be. Then I replaced the usual water in the kettle with rainwater I had collected at dawn, thinking that even nature now echoed in response to his lies. The coffee, which had always been his morning ritual, became another act of my protest. I added a little dirt collected from corners where no one usually looked, symbolizing how I felt submerged in the illusion of filth and deception. To finish my task, I carefully garnished his sandwiches with crumbs from the trash can, as if reminding him that even in the most familiar details, there was no forgiveness to be found. Every little thing, every action in this morning ritual was infused with my pain and bitterness. I wasn't seeking justification or recognition. I just wanted him to feel, if only for a moment, the full weight of his actions as I felt it in every breath I took. This breakfast became not just an act of revenge, but a way to reclaim a small piece of control over a life that had long lost its former harmony. Leaving behind the house where every morning reminded me of how things used to be, I stepped outside, trying to find even a fragment of peace. But on the parking lot, the familiar silhouette of his car immediately caught my eye. Only this time, it wasn't in its designated spot, but off to the side, as if trying to hide from prying eyes. This image stirred up a storm of emotions within me, emotions I had been trying so hard to suppress. My heart was racing, and every thought that flashed through my mind reminded me of the betrayal I had endured. The sense of injustice, the long hours of deceit, and the bitterness of lost trust made me realize that I could no longer remain passive. In that moment, it became clear to me. I had to give him an answer, even if it was symbolic, but it was necessary to regain a sense of control over my life. I walked closer to the car, feeling the cold wind, as if it were exposing every painful crack in my heart. In my hand, I held a small bag, filled with all those small items that seemed insignificant to others, but had become symbols of his lies to me. Among them were used napkins, a few old food wrappers, and even remnants of unnecessary trash collected in the silence of my anger. Each step toward the car felt like a ritual of liberation. I carefully, almost reverently, placed these small items on the hood and around it, as if leaving a message only I could understand. With each item left behind, I felt a piece of my pain leave me, turning into a kind of protest against everything that had led me to this moment. Looking at this unexpectedly decorated car, I didn't feel satisfaction from revenge, but rather a strange sense of relief, as if, at last, I had been able to express what had been building up inside me for months. Standing by the car and surveying the result of my actions, I felt both vulnerable and strong. This wasn't just an act of retribution. It was a way to declare to myself and to the world that I would no longer allow anyone to treat me the way I had been treated up until now. My internal state, filled with pain and anger, slowly transformed into the realization that, even if this act didn't restore lost trust, it had become the first step toward reclaiming my dignity. When I finally stepped back, looking at this small but significant scene, a new resolve awoke within me. Yes, my action had been impulsive, but it had given me the chance to feel my strength at a moment when everything around me seemed powerless. I knew that difficult decisions and a long journey of healing lay ahead, but in that moment, I felt that my pain had not gone unanswered. This was the beginning of change, not only in my relationship with Jack, but also in my perception of myself. I left, leaving behind not only the decorated car, but also a part of my past that could no longer define me. In that moment, I felt that my life belonged only to me, and no betrayals would ever again break the strength that had always been inside me. After I left the car, as if giving a piece of my sorrow to the outside world, I returned home, and a silence filled the air, accompanied by thoughts. In the solitude of the kitchen, where the usual bustle had once reigned, I sat by the window, allowing my emotions to pour out like a raging river. At first, anger and pain surged outward, but soon I felt something new beginning to seep through them. Quiet, but certain, a sense of inner strength. I remembered all those moments when Jack's betrayal shattered my hopes. But, as it turned out, every crack had become a mirror in which I saw my true self. In the reflection, I didn't see a wounded woman, but one who, despite the pain, found the courage to accept change. Every memory, every word left on his phone screen became a lesson, helping me understand that I would no longer allow someone else's lies to control my life. In the following days, I began to change gradually. Instead of clinging to the pain, I began looking for a new purpose. I wrote my thoughts in a journal where lines, initially filled with resentment, gradually gave way to revelations that my life belonged only to me. I discovered that in every little thing, from the dawn outside the window to the quiet murmuring of rain, there was a spark capable of warming my heart if I allowed myself to feel it. I started spending more time walking, where the fresh air and sounds of nature helped me capture each new moment of life. Each walk became a small journey to myself. I was learning to listen to my inner voice, which was telling me it was time to stop living in the past and start looking forward with an open heart. Gradually, I learned to forgive not only Jack, but also myself for those moments when I allowed the pain to overshadow my true essence. Inside me, confidence began to grow, like a thin thread connecting everything I had gone through with a new beginning. I understood that change wasn't an escape from the past, but an opportunity to outgrow it, learning from it and becoming stronger. My resentment, which once weighed heavily on my soul, now transformed into a desire to protect my independence and dignity. I could no longer allow lies to destroy me. I was learning to value every minute spent with myself, every moment when I could be honest with myself. So, amidst quiet evenings and the first glimpses of morning light, I began to rebuild my life. And although the scars from the betrayal still remained, they were no longer a symbol of defeat, but a reminder that even in the most difficult trials, one can find the strength to be reborn. This was the first step toward a new life, a life where every change became a testament to my ability to love myself and move forward, no matter what. I sat alone on the old couch, as if finding myself in a forgotten corner of my former life, and allowed my thoughts to drift far beyond the daily hustle. In the silence of the evening hours, when only the sounds of the city reminded me that time relentlessly moved forward, I began to rethink everything I had experienced. Everything that seemed destructive and painful unexpectedly turned into steps leading to a new understanding of myself and the world around me. Looking into the mirror for the first time, I didn't see the reflection of a weary woman who had lost herself in the maze of others' expectations, but one who had gone through trials and found inner strength. Every wrinkle, every quiet trace of fatigue told the story of weathered storms and small victories that had shaped me into who I was today. I realized that true beauty lies in the ability to accept one's story, with all its ups and downs, and to love oneself, no matter what. The long evenings became a time for personal dialogue, not with anyone, but with myself. I began writing my thoughts in a journal where at first the lines were filled with pain and regret, but gradually they shifted to an understanding that every mistake, every wrong choice had become lessons leading me to a new stage. I was learning to let go of the past, realizing that my worth is not measured by others' opinions, but by my decisions and my ability to love myself. I had once lived in fear of losing what seemed essential for happiness: approval, support, and stability. But now, I looked at the world through new eyes. Eyes that saw in each moment an opportunity for growth and self-expression. I became more attuned to my own desires, learning to listen to the inner voice that had once been drowned out by the noise of others' expectations. The decisions I made now were sincere and conscious. I stopped fearing change and began walking boldly toward the future I chose for myself. Each morning brought new opportunities. I began seeking joy in the little things. In the early light of dawn, in quiet conversations with books, in walks through familiar streets, where even the cool breeze whispered of new beginnings. Gradually, I learned to appreciate every moment, understanding that life is not a series of mistakes, but a journey in which every step is important. Letting go of old resentments, I uncovered qualities in myself that had been hidden behind a veil of pain and disappointment. I realized that every decision I made was an act of affirming myself, a sign that I would no longer allow others' actions to determine my destiny. Self-love became my main guide. I began to explore my interests with curiosity. I picked up brushes, wrote poems, sought inspiration in music and books. Each new activity brought me closer to understanding that I could not only survive losses, but also build a life filled with joy and self-expression. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, realizing that even falls were part of the path to a bright future. In every decision, in every new day, I found an opportunity to grow and change. My heart, once broken and closed off from the world, began to open again. I stopped depending on others' words and opinions, learning to rely on my intuition and inner wisdom. This new phase of my life became the embodiment of inner freedom. I no longer felt like a prisoner of old grievances or others' expectations. Instead, each of my choices became an expression of my individuality, my right to happiness. I accepted myself as I am, and with that acceptance came the understanding that the future belongs to those who know how to be true to themselves. In the quiet of the night, as the city fell asleep, I promised myself that I would never again allow the mistakes of the past to repeat. I took responsibility for every new decision, for every small victory. My inner awakening became a beacon, lighting the path ahead, and I now looked confidently toward the future, where every minute was an opportunity for a new story, a new beginning, a new love for myself. The morning came when I woke up with the realization that the past was behind me, and before me lay an immense future. The house, filled with the quiet freshness of early light, became the place where a new dream was born. A dream of a life where every minute belongs to me, and every decision is conscious and free. I sat at the table, sipping a cup of freshly brewed tea, and reflected on how much I had changed over the past few months. In every corner of my home now lingered the spirit of renewal. Photographs taken during walks around the city, notes with ideas for new ventures, even small souvenirs reminding me of encounters with interesting people. I realized that I no longer needed to depend on others' expectations or attempts to restore the old, lost trust. Questions that once tormented me now seemed like mere stages I had passed through on the way to personal freedom. Could I forgive him? Could I trust someone again who had so deeply wounded my heart? The answers were not clear-cut. The past had left scars, and they reminded me that trust is built over years, not in a moment. but I no longer sought comfort in others' words or attempts to return to what once was. I found comfort in my own strength, in the ability to listen to myself and move forward, despite any doubts. Each new day now is an opportunity for me to make a choice, to start the morning doing something I love, to write a few lines in my journal, to meet with friends, or simply to sit in silence, enjoying my own presence. I decided that I would no longer live in a constant state of waiting for someone or something to define my feelings. My life had become my own project, one that I would create step by step, with love for myself and respect for my desires. Amid conversations with new acquaintances, during meetings with close friends, and even in the quiet moments of solitude, I began to realize that each new experience, each small victory, was a brick in the foundation of my future. I began to plan where I would go on my next trip, which books I wanted to read, what I wanted to learn. It all seemed both simple and magical, because in every step there was the opportunity to change my life. I know that challenges and moments of doubt may lie ahead, but now I felt that the strength within me was enough to handle any challenges. My heart, open to new possibilities, no longer fears change. I understood that forgiveness is not necessarily a return to the past, but an act of liberation, offering a chance to begin anew without bitterness or resentment. And now, standing on the threshold of a new stage in my life, I look to the future with a light smile. Let the path be unknown, but I will meet every turn with a clear thought. I deserve happiness, and happiness begins with being true to myself. Today, I made my choice to move forward, to build a new story where the main character is me. A few days later, when I had begun to settle into the quiet of my new existence, fate threw me an unexpected challenge. One early morning, I walked into a small, cozy cafe in the city center, hoping to find a bit of peace and inspiration for the changes ahead. Sitting by the window, I watched the passers-by when a casual conversation at the neighboring table made me inadvertently listen in. Two women were quietly discussing a familiar name, Jack. The words with which they described his recent actions hit me like a cold shower. It turned out I wasn't the first to encounter his habit of destroying trust. One of the women mentioned that his infidelity was just the visible edge of a much more complicated story. According to her, Jack was involved in a complex web of relationships, where each connection had its hidden motives and secrets, often rooted in events from his distant past. Listening to these words, I felt as though the world around me was starting to crack. Everything I had experienced, his lies, betrayal, even my own revenge, suddenly took on a new, layered meaning. Maybe his actions weren't just thoughtless betrayal, but an attempt to hide some painful wound rooted in events I could never have imagined. Perhaps I was just one of the pawns in his clever game, and behind the scenes, there was an unknown force that had given him the reason to act the way he did. This unexpected information, delivered in the simple words of strangers, turned my understanding of the past upside down. Questions flared in my mind. Who had actually been the victim of his tricks? And maybe his actions were an attempt to protect someone or something that meant more to him than anything else? The face of the woman they were talking about remained a mystery to me, but her mention made me wonder, could she have been not just another mistress, but an accomplice or even a victim of circumstances I hadn't even begun to suspect? Sitting in the cafe, I felt a strange mix of anger and curiosity. My inner drive for healing and renewal suddenly collided with the need to know the truth, to unravel this tangled web of relationships. Perhaps Jack had been hiding from me not only his infidelity, but a much deeper secret, one that could forever change my understanding of our shared history. This unexpected twist of fate became a moment of reevaluation of everything that had happened. I realized it was time to ask myself and those around me the questions whose answers might shed light on the dark corners of his past. The future no longer seemed so straightforward, and each new detail became an opportunity to uncover the truth. I stood up, feeling the resolve igniting inside me. The resolve not just to accept my pain, but to seek the truth, no matter how complicated it might turn out to be. And though the path ahead was unknown, I understood that in this search lay my chance for true liberation, and perhaps a new understanding of who I am and who I want to be in this world.